Mariana, a newcomer full of insecurity, crosses the gates of hell, a gym where influencers and bodybuilders tear her apart with ruthless mockery. Just when she is about to give up, Dwayne Johnson appears. With just a few words, the giant of cinema stops the humiliation and transforms the story. What happened next? Subscribe and tell us where you're watching us from. The sound of the alarm clock interrupted the silence of the early morning, and Mariana woke up with a start. The dim glow of light filtering through the curtains and the sounds of the city awakening gave her the feeling that she was running late, even though it was still early. She sat up in bed, rubbing her eyes, and took a quick glance at the clock. She had time, at least a few minutes. The day she had anticipated so much had finally arrived. Her first day at Gold's Gym Venice. Despite the excitement she felt about the opportunity, an uneasy sensation formed in her stomach. She got out of bed, walked slowly to the bathroom, and as the water from the shower cascaded over her skin, she couldn't help but wonder how everything would turn out. She knew that place was iconic, a temple of fitness, but something inside her kept telling her that she wasn't ready. When she finished, she stepped out of the shower, looked at herself in the mirror, and paused. Her reflection stared back at her with an image she wasn't entirely happy with. She examined her figure, her not-so-defined muscles, her slightly tired face, and thought about all the times she had questioned whether she truly belonged in that world. Doubts surrounded her. At that moment, however, she decided she wasn't going to back down. She had made the decision to go, and she was going to follow through. She adjusted her workout clothes, tied her shoelaces, and, taking a deep breath, stepped out of her apartment, heading toward her new adventure. The crisp morning air hit her as she stepped onto the street, offering her a moment of relief. As she walked toward the gym, she watched the city beginning to wake up. In the distance, a group of runners passed by, moving with steady strides and coordination, and further ahead, a few cyclists sped along on their bikes. Mariana observed them in silence, wondering if she would ever have that same discipline, that level of commitment to her body and mind. As she walked, she watched the cyclists moving along the path, some greeting each other, others completely absorbed in their own rhythm. Would she ever be able to train as consistently as they did, day after day, without hesitation? The uncertainty surfaced again. It wasn't easy, she knew that, but she was determined to try. She had to believe she could do it. As she continued her walk, Mariana thought that perhaps there was something symbolic in all of this, as if being surrounded by such determined individuals was shaping a part of herself, even if she didn't realize it yet. Before entering the gym, Mariana made a quick stop at a supplement store. She looked at the shelves filled with protein powders and pre-workout formulas, wondering if she really needed any of it. The salesperson tried to convince her, but in the end, she decided to buy just a basic protein jar. She didn't feel ready for more yet. She walked toward the gym, her breathing deepened, and her steps became firmer. She knew the day wouldn't be easy, but she was already there. The first step had been taken. When Mariana crossed the street and stopped in front of the imposing entrance of Gold's Gym Venice, she felt her heart race. She took a deep breath and pushed open the glass door. The clanging of weights and voices filled the air, reinforcing its reputation as the temple of the strongest. After taking her first steps and entering the training area, a group of muscular men and women turned their heads in her direction. One of them let out a loud laugh and whispered something in his companion's ear. Mariana felt like all eyes were on her. In that moment, she wanted to turn around and run out. But she took a deep breath and headed toward the cardio area, determined to go through with what she had planned. As she walked through the area, she crossed paths with a woman lifting weights near the entrance. Mariana noticed her imposing physique before she even looked at her. When their eyes met, Candy looked her up and down, with a mocking smile on her face. Mariana wasn't sure if she had imagined it, but she felt like something in the woman's expression said more than just a quick glance. The woman quickly looked away, but the contemptuous smile didn't disappear. Mariana pressed her lips together and kept walking, feeling the discomfort stick to her back. With a slight unease in her chest, Mariana arrived at the treadmill area. She noticed that all of them were occupied, and though some people were about to finish their exercise, the wait time seemed endless. Mariana saw an available treadmill and hurried toward it. Just as she was about to step on, a man stepped in front of her, and without looking at her, threw his towel over the control panel, marking his territory without saying a word. Mariana stood there, feeling the burn on her face, caught between humiliation and anger. She turned around and looked for other options, but everything seemed occupied. Before anxiety could take over, a man approached her with a smile. "Don't worry, not everyone is like that," he said with a friendly smile. "Would you like me to save this one for you when I'm done?" Mariana nodded, grateful for the gesture. Despite everything that had happened, this small act of kindness gave her a bit of relief. Mariana headed to the weight area and found some light weights in a corner. As soon as she lifted them, she felt her lack of strength compared to the ease with which others moved huge plates. Her discomfort grew, but she forced herself to keep going. Determined to try something different, Mariana approached a training machine she had seen some of the more experienced bodybuilders using. It seemed like a simple piece of equipment, but she still didn't know exactly how to use it. As she got closer, a group of muscular men, who hadn't noticed her, occupied the machine without any regard for others. Each of them seemed completely absorbed in their own training. Mariana approached the machine, but a group of men was using it without looking around. One of them looked at her and said, "Are you going to use the machine, or are you just admiring it?" Mariana felt her throat dry up. "I'm just waiting my turn." "Well, keep waiting," the man replied with a mocking smile before easily lifting the weight again. Mariana felt a lump in her throat. Her hands were trembling, and no matter how much she tried to take a deep breath, she couldn't shake the feeling of failure. She lowered her head, overwhelmed, and decided to move to another area with machines. But she stopped. "No, I can't leave like this," she told herself, clenching her fists. Then she heard a voice behind her. "Do you need help?" Mariana turned around and, looking up, saw a tall, serious man with a whistle hanging. He was undoubtedly a trainer. "Sorry, I just can't find any free machines." "Come here." Immediately, the trainer approached the man who had been rude to Mariana, and with a serious look that accepted no contradictions, he said in an authoritative voice, "Jean just finished using this machine. Isn't that right, Jean?" Jean smiled at the trainer, looked at Mariana, and then left. "Come on, take the machine," the trainer told Mariana. The trainer watched her for a moment, assessing her posture and discomfort. Instead of simply showing her how to use the machine, as she had expected, he began giving her some general advice. "The first thing you need to do is focus on your form, not the weight. Technique is the most important thing," he told her, pointing out her posture. The trainer didn't seem upset or impatient, as she had assumed others would be. "Start with light weight and make sure to do each rep with control," he added while demonstrating some slow and deliberate movements. Mariana nodded, feeling surprised by the attention, but also grateful. That brief moment of guidance, though small, gave her a sense of relief. Mariana was standing in front of a machine that she still didn't know how to handle very well. Despite the advice from the trainer who had guided her, she couldn't find the right rhythm. Her movements were clumsier than she had expected, and although she tried to hide her discomfort, a small mistake made her lose balance. The machine made a dull noise, as if trying to warn her to stop. At that moment, Mariana straightened up, taking a deep breath, but when she looked around, she noticed something strange. A person with a cell phone in hand, pointing discreetly towards her. Mariana stayed still for a few seconds, observing the individual, who quickly hid the phone. She wasn't sure if she had been recorded, but the nervousness inside her grew as she felt something wasn't right. The gym seemed louder than ever. Between the echoes of weights dropping, conversations, and workouts, Mariana heard a female voice. Candy's voice cut through the atmosphere, loud and dramatic. "What's this girl doing here?" she said, as if Mariana were an insect deserving to be crushed. Her gaze fixed on her with absolute contempt. "Does she really think she has the right to take up space in a serious gym?" she continued, raising her voice even more so everyone could hear her. Mariana tried to ignore the laughter, but it felt like all eyes were on her. Her heart was pounding, and a sense of distress overwhelmed her. Was this how everyone saw her now? Mariana tried to keep training, but the mental and emotional fatigue was starting to take over. Each movement felt heavier than the last, as if the entire gym were watching her and waiting for her to fail. Candy's words kept echoing in her head. "You don't deserve to be here." For a moment, she thought it was true. Was she really made for this? For a second, everything faded away. Mariana closed her eyes, and the image of her high school days appeared in her mind, when people used to mock her for not being good enough at anything. Insecurity had been her companion for years. Why should it be different now? Still, a spark of determination remained alive deep within her. She couldn't give up. Not this time. Dwayne Johnson was driving his Porsche Panamera through the streets of Los Angeles. His gaze was fixed on the road, but Dwayne's mind was still working at full speed. He had a day full of commitments ahead, the shooting of a new movie. As he drove through familiar curves and streets, something reminded him of his friend Mark, and he realized that he was just passing near where Mark usually trained. He checked his watch, and seeing that he had a little extra time, he pulled the steering wheel and veered toward Gold's Gym Venice to pay him a surprise visit. It had been a while since he last saw him, and they didn't always manage to meet. Dwayne was wearing a dark business suit, perfectly tailored to his body. The dark sunglasses partially covered his face, giving him an air of mystery and control. The Porsche Panamera stopped in front of the gym entrance. Dwayne turned off the engine and adjusted his sunglasses, briefly scanning the surroundings. The hustle and bustle of the place immediately enveloped him, the sound of weights being lifted. Without thinking any further, he walked toward the entrance of the gym, knowing people would be looking at him. But his attention was elsewhere. He wanted to greet old Mark. As he crossed the threshold, the bustling atmosphere of the gym greeted him. The sounds of weights dropping, the shouts of encouragement, and the vibrant energy of the workouts filled the air. However, something wasn't quite right. Dwayne, who had always been surrounded by a large number of people, noticed that this time something was missing. He couldn't find Mark at the reception or in the training areas. He decided to wait for him in the main area, where he could observe the general movement of the place. He approached the reception desk and sat down, watching with interest the interactions between the trainers, the bodybuilders, and the gym visitors. However, while waiting, his attention was caught by something that didn't go unnoticed by him. The behavior in the gym seemed somewhat different. Dwayne realized that Mariana was there, in a corner of the gym, struggling with an exercise at one of the weight stations. Her posture showed signs of fatigue, and her face reflected not only the physical effort, but also a growing frustration. From afar, he couldn't help but notice how a small group was watching her. Some were smiling, while others whispered to each other. Although he couldn't hear the words, the tone of the situation was clear. Mariana was the center of attention, but not in the right way. In that instant, he understood that something wasn't right. Mariana wasn't being supported, but rather seemed to be the target of mockery. Dwayne moved a little closer, observing that the bodybuilders who formed the circle were watching her, as if she were easy prey. Mariana was trying in vain to focus on her movements, but her eyes kept sliding toward the mocking faces. Dwayne saw how the group laughed every time she failed at a repetition or looked unsure while performing an exercise. From his place, Dwayne couldn't stand watching the situation in silence. Every gesture of disdain toward her fueled the anger he felt growing inside. It was incomprehensible to him that the atmosphere of that gym, a place where personal improvement should have been the focus, could be so cruel. The laughter of the mockers fueled Dwayne's fury, his body reacting almost instinctively. He wanted to stand up and put an end to it all immediately, but something stopped him. He knew that giving in to rage would only make things worse. It wouldn't be aggression that would change the situation, but his leadership and control. Dwayne took a deep breath, controlling the fury that was burning him inside. He knew that violence would only increase the humiliation. Instead, he chose to do what he knew best, lead with his presence and his words. With renewed calm, Dwayne watched for a few more seconds. The group of mockers continued their game, ignoring Mariana's discomfort. But Dwayne was sure that his presence would be enough to change the course of the situation. In the distance, Dwayne heard Valeria, who had been observing the scene with a certain amusement. "Your place is in a bakery, not in a gym," said Valeria, with a mocking smile on her lips. The words cut through the air with a sharp clarity. Dwayne frowned when he heard the harshness in Valeria's voice. It wasn't just a critique. It was a direct attack that reinforced the idea that Mariana didn't belong there. The comment struck deep in Mariana. Dwayne saw her tense even more, the color of her face turning a reddish hue. The tension grew when Mariana, visibly upset, tried to take a step back to get away from the situation, but in her attempt to leave, she tripped. A pre-workout protein shake she was holding fell to the ground, spilling onto the cold cement of the gym. The liquid spread across the floor in the blink of an eye, and the sound of the plastic breaking echoed throughout the place. The gazes of the onlookers shifted to the mess, as if it were yet another reason to laugh. Her face turned even redder, and for a moment, her impulse was to hide. Mariana seemed lost, struggling against the panic that was overtaking her as she crouched down to pick up what was left of the cup. Dwayne watched, but instead of feeling anger, he felt growing concern. Mariana was at her limit. Mike, the leader of the mockers, didn't miss the chance to make the situation a new source of amusement. He walked over to where Mariana was picking up the spill and let out a loud, almost disdainful laugh. "You definitely should be in a bakery," he said, pointing at the spill as if it were the final nail in the coffin for her humiliation. Mike's laughter echoed in the air, but what Dwayne saw at that moment was an opportunity. Mariana didn't respond. She didn't react to the comment. Instead of responding with more shame or anger, she simply stayed silent, picking up the cup without saying a word. The mockery continued. Mariana's distress was palpable, but before she could sink completely, she heard a different sound. Firm footsteps approaching. Everyone fell silent instantly, as if the air itself had changed. Without saying a word, Dwayne grabbed a towel and walked with firm steps toward Mariana. Everyone in the gym stood staring, unsure whether they should applaud, move aside, or continue with what they were doing. When he reached her, he extended the towel without waiting for a response, as if that gesture was all that needed to be done to change the situation. Mariana, confused by the attention, looked up at him and accepted the towel with a mix of surprise and relief. "Take it easy," Dwayne told her in a firm voice. And suddenly, Mariana no longer felt alone. The gym went silent when Dwayne crossed his arms in front of the mockers. The shadow of Dwayne covered Mike. The size difference spoke for itself. Mike tried to appear defiant, but his discomfort was obvious. The murmurs stopped. The silence stretched, thick and oppressive. Mike tried to maintain his defiant attitude, but his hands, once relaxed, closed into fists without him realizing. A drop of sweat slid down his temple. No one dared to break the silence. Dwayne didn't need to raise his voice. He looked at Mike and clearly said, "Do you know who really doesn't belong here? Anyone who discourages others' effort." The words resonated in the air, and there was no immediate response. At first, Mike tried to maintain his stance, as if he could ignore the magnitude of what he had just heard, but the tension on his face gave him away. Dwayne wasn't just defending Mariana. He was saying something that transcended the immediate situation. The gym members, who had previously watched the scene as something unrelated, began to feel part of a change. It wasn't just that Dwayne was protecting someone. He was also reminding everyone what it really meant to belong in that place. Mike, with his pride wounded, gritted his teeth and let out a snort before responding with his typical arrogance. "And what do you know about strength?" he challenged, crossing his arms. But before he could continue, Dwayne raised a hand and interrupted him with the calmness of someone who had already won the confrontation before it even started. "Mike, you want to talk about strength?" Dwayne said, his voice clear and direct. "Real strength isn't in the muscles, it's in the mindset. Lifting weights is easy, but lifting someone's spirits, or even realizing that what weighs the most here aren't the weights, but the prejudices, is much harder." Dwayne's statement was as simple as it was powerful. Mike, who considered himself the king of that place, didn't know how to respond to such a direct statement. His face reflected discomfort, but his pride kept him silent. The whole gym was watching him, no longer with respect, but with doubt. Mike's muscles tensed as if he were ready to attack. He stepped forward, fists clenched, his jaw marked by contained fury. "Do you think you can come here and teach me lessons?" he hissed, his voice full of rage. The tension in the gym was suffocating. One wrong move and everything could explode into disaster. But then, Dwayne slightly tilted his head, as if assessing the threat, and let out a brief, low laugh. "If you want to fight someone, try fighting your own ego," he said with crushing calmness. "Because it seems like that's the only thing hitting you right now." Mike stopped, his expression shifting from anger to uncertainty. And just at that moment, heavy boots echoed against the rubber floor. The gym owner crossed the door with a frown and a sharp look scanning the scene. He was used to disputes between members, but something in the atmosphere told him this incident was different. Dwayne recognized him instantly, and without losing his stance, he approached him. "Do you have a discrimination policy here, or do you only allow egos to train?" The question was thrown with the same confidence as his previous words. His gaze met the owner's, and for a moment, the owner seemed to evaluate him, as if weighing his options. The owner, although clearly uncomfortable, nodded his head. There was a clear difference between the gym members and someone of Dwayne Johnson's caliber. For a moment, the owner seemed to measure his words. When he finally spoke, his tone was polite but somewhat tense, as if caught between his duty to maintain order and the surprise of a celebrity's presence. "Dwayne, I wasn't expecting to see you here," the owner said, with a tense tone. "There are too many people today. It's hard to control everything." "I understand," Dwayne replied, "but this shouldn't be happening in a gym like this." The owner nodded, aware that he couldn't afford to lose control in front of everyone. His gaze shifted toward the other gym members, who were watching the exchange with growing interest, as if waiting for a resolution. Some began to look at Mariana with new eyes. She was no longer the shy girl who had walked through the door that morning. Now she was part of something bigger, something that everyone could see in the palpable change that had occurred in that space. The atmosphere shifted. There were no more laughs, just looks of respect. Amid the bustle, a woman approached Mariana. Zoe, an experienced bodybuilder who had been watching from the beginning, couldn't help but notice the shift in the gym's dynamic. She had been in Mariana's position once, and although her success had led her to become a respected figure, she had never forgotten the struggles she faced on her own journey. "We all start from zero," Zoe said with a smile as she settled next to her. "The key is not letting others define you. What matters is what you can achieve." Mariana looked at her in surprise. The confidence Zoe exuded was contagious, and for a moment, the insecurity she had been carrying seemed to fade away. Zoe was everything Mariana aspired to be at that moment: strong, respected, and determined. As Zoe walked away, Mariana stood there, looking ahead, with the feeling that she was ready to face whatever came next. The afternoon, which had started full of insecurities, now felt like an opportunity for something new. Something that, for the first time, Mariana felt she could reach. Greg, who had remained on the sidelines, could not stand it any longer. He walked to the center of the gym, interrupting the murmur of the crowd. With a firm voice, he challenged Mike. "Mike, how about we make this interesting? Since you're so confident in your strength, why not a lifting competition? You against Dwayne." The comment took everyone by surprise. There was a moment of silence before whispers and looks of disbelief began. Mike frowned. He knew that rejecting the challenge in front of everyone would be a sign of weakness, something he could not afford. Around him, some of his friends were watching, waiting for his response. Although part of him suspected that Greg had an ulterior motive, his pride prevented him from thinking too much about it. "Why not?" Mike responded with a forced smile. "It'll be a good show." Greg nodded with satisfaction and turned to Dwayne, who had been watching the scene with his arms crossed and a neutral expression. "Do you have a problem with this, Dwayne?" Dwayne smiled slightly. "Not at all. I just hope it's fair." The entire gym gathered around the weight area. Basic rules were established. Each participant would lift an initial weight, and then it would progressively increase until one of the two could not continue. The bench press was chosen as the final test. Mike started with confidence. He lay on the bench and easily lifted 120 kilograms, receiving applause from his supporters. Then it was Dwayne's turn, who replicated the lift effortlessly. The competition continued as the weight increased. At 150 kilograms, Mike began to show signs of strain, but he managed to complete the rep. Dwayne, on the other hand, did it without hesitation. When they reached 180 kilograms, the difference between the two became evident. Mike needed a spotter to complete the rep, while Dwayne lifted it with ease, as if it posed no challenge. The murmurs grew among the crowd. Mike tried to hide his frustration, but his labored breathing gave him away. In an attempt to regain control of the situation, he asked to increase the weight to 200 kilograms. Greg raised an eyebrow but agreed. When Mike settled on the bench, everyone saw how his hands were shaking before even touching the bar. As he lowered it, his face immediately turned red, and although he tried to push it up, the weight barely moved. He had to let go of it immediately, and two spotters rushed to lift it before an accident occurred. The room fell silent. All eyes were on Mike, who was still trembling as he lay on the bench, regaining color in his face. None of his friends dared to look at him, knowing that any attempt to defend him would be futile. The tension was palpable, and when Dwayne, without hurry, settled on the bench, the entire gym held its breath. With barely visible effort, he lifted the same amount of weight and then asked to increase to 250 kilograms, accomplishing it comfortably. The impact in the room was immediate. No one had expected such a brutal difference between the two competitors. Dwayne sat up and looked at Greg with a smile. I think that's enough, don't you? Greg nodded with a satisfied smile. Mike tried to mask his defeat while checking his phone, but his discomfort was obvious. His followers began to distance themselves, unsure of what to say. It was then that Zoe, who had remained silent until now, decided to intervene. "Well, Mike," she said, approaching with a smile that made it unclear whether it was one of sympathy or mockery. "I didn't expect you to be this quiet. You know? I think you just had bad luck." Mike looked up suspiciously. "What do you mean?" "Maybe if you try again with the right mindset, you could do it. Maybe the pressure worked against you. Come on, what's the worst that could happen?" Her words were not casual. She knew exactly what she was doing. Mike was too proud to ignore a challenge, and she had placed him in a situation where refusing would only make him look even weaker. Mike scanned the room with his eyes. He saw some expectant faces, others mocking. He couldn't let his reputation end like this. "Fine," he said, straightening up. "But I'll do this my way." He approached the weight bench again. The same weight that Dwayne had lifted effortlessly was still there, waiting. The silence became absolute. Mike gripped the bar firmly. With a strong push, he attempted to lift it. But as soon as the weight came off the rack, his arms began to shake immediately. His muscles tensed to their limit. The bar barely moved up an inch before gravity pulled it back down. A couple of assistants quickly intervened to secure it in place. The failure was evident. Mike sat down, breathing heavily, his fists clenched. Well, it's fine. It happens to anyone," Zoe said. Mike didn't respond. His eyes avoided making contact with others, and his expression was a mix of anger and shame. But Zoe wasn't finished yet. The bodybuilder turned casually to Mike's two friends, the same ones who, all afternoon, along with Mike, had mocked Mariana, but who, as soon as things got serious, had stayed on the sidelines. "Guys, I saw you very enthusiastic all afternoon with Mike," she said, her tone light but with clear intention. "But now that he needs you, neither of you intervenes." "What do you mean?" one of them asked, with a nervous laugh. Zoe raised her eyebrows. "If you really believe in Mike, you should help him." The silence returned. Mike's two friends blinked, feeling that all eyes were now on them. A couple of people laughed, and some started chanting, playing along with Zoe. "Come on, help him." "Like a team." "And now what?" "You just watch." Both of their faces stiffened. They were trapped. If they refused, they would look cowardly. But if they tried and failed, they would be ridiculed just like Mike. One of them, the tallest, sighed. "Fine. Between the three of us, we can do it." Mike, still with his pride wounded, said nothing. But in his gaze, there was the hope of saving some dignity. The two positioned themselves on each side of the bar. The bar rose only a few centimeters, and then nothing. The strength drained from them in seconds. Their faces twisted with effort, but the weight didn't budge an inch more. A burst of laughter broke the silence. One of them let go of the bar first, and the other followed instantly, allowing the assistants to place it back on its rack. They couldn't hide the shame consuming them. They lowered their heads. Zoe crossed her arms, satisfied. "Well, at least you tried." No one responded. The three of them knew the damage had already been done. Their image, their reputation in the gym, everything had been destroyed in a matter of minutes. And the rest of the people present, those who had once feared Mike and his group, now looked at them in a completely different way. Mariana watched in silence, feeling that the moment had arrived. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. "I want to try," she said loudly. Several people turned toward her. Mike and his henchmen barely reacted, still consumed by shame, but the rest of the people present paid attention. Dwayne, who was standing in a corner with his arms crossed, raised his eyebrows with interest. Zoe, on the other hand, smiled approvingly. "All right, Mariana," said the bodybuilder. How much do you think you can lift? Mariana swallowed. She didn't have a clear answer. I don't know, she admitted, but I want to try. Zoe moved closer and quickly adjusted the weight on the bar, while Dwayne watched. All right, Mariana, this is your moment. The people started whispering. Is it too much for her? I don't think she can do it. I bet she won't get 2 reps. Mariana heard the whispers, but she was determined to try, not caring if she failed. Then, with controlled effort, she lifted the bar off the rack. Her arms trembled for a moment, but she managed to stabilize it. She lowered the weight slowly to her chest, and, with a strong exhale, pushed it back up. Halfway through the lift, Mariana felt her wrist slip slightly. A sudden pain shot through her arm. The bar wobbled, and for a moment it seemed like it was going to fall. Dwayne moved forward to help her, but then Mariana stabilized it and managed to place it back in position. A burst of applause filled the gym. Mariana, surprised by her own achievement, sat down with a satisfied smile. Zoe gave her a pat on the shoulder. Impressive. Dwayne, with his arms crossed, nodded with a look of pride. I told you, you're stronger than you think. Mariana looked around. The same people who had ignored or belittled her before were now applauding her. The difference was striking. Then, the voice of the gym owner echoed in the room. The owner of Gold's Gym stepped through the crowd and addressed everyone. I've seen many things in this place, he said in a firm voice, but what happened today made it clear that we need to make some changes. Everyone listened attentively. This place has to be for everyone. No more humiliation. Let everyone earn their respect through hard work and effort. Some people nodded. Others, like Mike and his group, looked down. Mariana looked at Zoe, who was smiling with satisfaction. This is a good twist, Zoe whispered. But not everyone shared the same excitement. In a corner, Mike was trying to leave the gym without drawing attention when Dwayne's voice stopped him. Mike. The bodybuilder froze. He closed his eyes for a second and then slowly turned around. Dwayne watched him with a neutral expression. There was no mockery or contempt in his gaze, only a seriousness that felt even more uncomfortable. I want to tell you something before you leave, said Dwayne, taking a few steps forward. Mike didn't respond, but he didn't move either. Respect isn't earned at the expense of others. Earn it with hard work and humility. Mike turned his gaze away. So what? Everyone already hates me now. Dwayne shook his head. It's not about whether they hate or admire you. It's about who you choose to be after this. The silence between them stretched for several seconds. Mike seemed to be debating internally. Finally, without saying another word, he turned and left the gym. Dwayne watched him leave and then looked at Mariana, who had seen the scene from a distance. Some lessons are hard to learn, he said softly, but there's always a chance to change. Mariana, still processing the experience of the day, was still the center of attention, but this time it was not because of mockery. She was receiving something very different. Respect. Suddenly, Dwayne approached her with a smile that lit up his face. Do you really want to train? He asked, with a firm but friendly voice. Mariana, a bit surprised by the direct question, looked him up and down. The image of Dwayne in his immaculate suit, clearly out of place for a workout, made her hesitate for a moment. Finally, she nodded, though with some reluctance, and responded in a slightly hesitant voice. Yes, I want to train. Dwayne didn't wait any longer. Let's start with something simple. Posture, control, and endurance, he said as he pointed to the free weights area. You're doing well, he would say every time he saw a small improvement, encouraging her to keep going. But then, Mariana tried to lift a little more weight and felt her grip falter. The barbell tilted dangerously, and Dwayne reacted immediately, stabilizing it before it could fall. Mariana felt a warmth rise to her cheeks. I'm sorry. I can't, she murmured, her voice filled with frustration. Dwayne looked at her seriously, but without harshness. "Don't say you can't. It just means you can't yet. But if you keep going, you'll make it." Mariana took a deep breath. The weight was still there, but her determination was stronger. She gritted her teeth and tried again. Mariana's training had taken an unexpected turn when Zoe approached again. With her strong but calm presence, she joined the session without saying much, but her intentions were clear. Mariana had been practicing with Dwayne for a while, but upon seeing her, Zoe noticed something in her technique that could be improved. "Let's correct a couple of details," Zoe said, showing a slight smile, as if she knew exactly what was needed to take Mariana to the next level. "Posture is key, but breathing is important too. Inhale when you go down, and exhale when you go up. Try now." Mariana, somewhat surprised, nodded. At first, Zoe's correction seemed minimal, but as she tried it, she began to notice the difference. The controlled breathing gave her a sense of flow and control that she had never experienced before. While Mariana focused on applying Zoe's technique, something strange began to happen. Several girls training nearby started to approach, drawn by Zoe's technique and Dwayne's presence. "Can I try too?" asked one of the girls, excited. With a soft laugh, Zoe invited her to join, and soon more women gathered in the area, seeking to improve their posture, control, and technique. Suddenly, Mariana's muscles began to fatigue. Sweat covered her forehead, and the sensation of pain in her legs and arms became increasingly unbearable. Zoe and Dwayne's comments pushed her forward, but there was also a small and persistent thought lingering in her mind. "Is it worth continuing?" Dwayne, who had been watching her, approached. Seeing the expression of doubt on her face, he knew it was time to say something. He leaned slightly toward her and straightforwardly said, "Nothing is worth more than the satisfaction of knowing you didn't give up when you wanted to the most." Mariana looked at him, surprised by the sincerity in his words. At that moment, something inside her changed. It wasn't just her body that was challenging her, but also her mind. Why let fatigue and doubts stop her now? A new surge of energy ran through her, and with an almost imperceptible smile, she placed her hands back on the bar, determined to keep going. Zoe and Dwayne's support was changing something inside her. She was no longer the girl who had felt small and ridiculed when she first entered. Now, as she lifted the bar for the 5th time, she felt her body and mind merge into one purpose: not to give up. A glow of confidence surrounded her. Mariana was no longer just lifting weights. She was lifting the confidence she had lost in herself a long time ago. Mariana, still recovering from the day's effort, leaned on a bench, watching others train. She could still feel the weight of the effort in her muscles, but this time it wasn't a feeling of defeat, but of satisfaction. When she first entered, the same place seemed like a hostile territory, where every gaze felt like a judgment and every laugh reminded her she didn't belong. Now the atmosphere was different, and not because the gym had changed, but because she saw it with different eyes. Dwayne passed by and gave her a nod. "Good job today." Mariana smiled, but didn't say anything immediately. She looked at the clock and knew she would have to leave soon. The day had been long, but inside her, a decision was taking shape. She took a deep breath, and before leaving the bench, she thought about something she had never seriously considered before: coming back tomorrow. Not because she felt she had to, nor from the pressure of proving something to others. Simply because she wanted to. "How do you feel?" Dwayne asked. "Tired, but good," she replied honestly. He nodded in approval. "That's how it should be." Mariana straightened up, expecting another comment or correction. Instead, Dwayne crossed his arms and said, "Progress is slow. It's not about what you achieve today or tomorrow. It's about continuing to move forward, even if it's little by little." Mariana looked down for a moment, absorbing his words. "And what if one day I don't feel like it?" Dwayne smiled slightly. "Then you come and do what you can. It's not about being perfect, it's about not stopping." Mariana nodded. She would have thought that she had to train with maximum intensity or it wouldn't be worth it. Now she understood that the process didn't work that way. She was about to respond when she noticed that Dwayne was checking his watch with a slight look of concern. The gym door opened, and a tall figure walked in with a firm step. He was wearing a dark cap and a sleeveless hoodie, revealing well-toned arms. Mariana noticed that some people recognized him immediately. Dwayne let out a slight laugh and shook his head. "Right on time." Mariana looked at him with curiosity. "Who is he?" Dwayne sighed and put his phone away. "That's Mark. And I need to leave right now if I don't want to get killed on the shoot." Before Mariana could process the situation, Mark approached and raised an eyebrow upon seeing Dwayne in a hurry. "Running away before he arrives? How suspicious." Dwayne laughed and gave him a pat on the shoulder. "You have no idea how much I extended myself today to give you time to get here." Then he turned to Mariana. "Before I go, I want you to meet someone. Mariana, this is Mark. Mark, this is Mariana." Mark gave her a friendly smile. "I've heard about you. Looks like you've already earned a spot here." Mariana crossed her arms, slightly puzzled. "I wasn't aware of my fame." Dwayne interrupted before the conversation could continue. "You two should talk another time." Mariana looked at Dwayne suspiciously. "And why exactly?" Dwayne just smiled sideways and began to walk away. "You'll find that out yourselves." Before they could press him with more questions, he was already gone. Mark looked at her with an intrigued expression. "Well, looks like we have something in common." Mariana, still not understanding what Dwayne was planning, decided she wouldn't lose anything by finding out. It was a rainy morning outside the gym, but the usual noise of the gym drowned out the sound of the raindrops falling. The sound of metal clashing echoed in the gym as Mariana and Zoe trained together. They had been at it for almost an hour, moving from squats to pull-ups, then to weightlifting. Mariana still couldn't match Zoe's strength, but her endurance had improved significantly. This time, she wasn't afraid to push herself harder, to feel the burn in her muscles, or to fail on a rep. Zoe, leaning against a bar, watched her with a slight smile. "Good job, that was solid," she commented as Mariana finished a set. Mariana set the weight on the floor and took a breath before responding. "Thanks. Although if it weren't for you, maybe I wouldn't have made it this far." Zoe raised an eyebrow, surprised. "For me?" Mariana nodded and took a sip of water before continuing. "From the very beginning, that first day, when everyone looked at me with disdain, you treated me like I really belonged here. You helped me without hesitation, and I know you had no obligation to do so." Zoe shrugged casually. "I don't do favors out of pity, Mariana. From the very first moment, I noticed your resilience and wanted to witness your evolution. Also, you're a great person." Mariana looked at her in silence for a moment. She wasn't used to receiving compliments like that, especially in a place she had once felt so out of place. "Thank you," she said, with sincerity that Zoe immediately noticed. Zoe smiled and tossed her a towel. "Take a minute to rest. Then I want to see you with more weight on those squats." Mariana let out a small laugh. "You're not going to let me off the hook, are you?" "Not even in your dreams," Zoe replied with amusement. Between sets, Mariana sat on a bench while Zoe checked the timer on her phone. They had been training together for days, and although at first Mariana had simply followed the pace, now she was beginning to take more control over her own process. Zoe, still looking at the timer, spoke casually. "So, tell me, what's your next goal?" Mariana blinked, not expecting the question. She took a second to think, but in reality, she already knew the answer. She lifted her gaze and with more confidence than she had had in a long time, she said, "My goal is to push my own limits, not just in the gym, but in everything I do." Zoe stopped looking at her phone and smiled approvingly. "That's a good goal." Mariana nodded. She wasn't just talking about the gym. She understood it now. Her progress wasn't just about lifting more weight or looking different. It was about the person she was becoming, both inside and outside the gym. "And you, what's your goal?" Mariana asked, genuinely curious. Zoe crossed her arms and exhaled, thoughtful. "To keep growing, and to help others do it too." Mariana smiled. Maybe, unknowingly, Zoe was already fulfilling that. The training was over. Mariana left the gym with sore muscles but a clear mind. She walked down the hallway leading to the exit, where a full-length mirror reflected her image. She stopped. Instinctively, she looked up and observed herself. For the first time, she saw someone strong. She smiled, and without saying anything else, she kept walking. Eric, a fitness content creator, had been at Gold's Gym days earlier and had captured the confrontation between Mariana and Mike. When reviewing the footage on his computer, he realized he had something powerful on his hands, a story of overcoming adversity that could change lives. Without thinking too much about it, he edited the video, adding subtitles and highlighting the key moments. He uploaded it to his social media. Mariana still had no idea what was going on. Zoe, in the meantime, was the first to show her the video. They were in the gym, ready to train, when Zoe pulled out her phone and showed her the screen. She saw herself standing firm against adversity, with the crowd reacting to every word from Dwayne. The comments, full of admiration and support, flooded her mind. But what struck her the most was realizing that her story was now out there. It was no longer just hers. She felt a mix of excitement and confusion. This is crazy," she murmured. Zoe smiled. "No. This is what happens when someone dares to change their story." Mariana felt a wave of pride, but also a responsibility. Her story was out there now. It was no longer just hers. As Mariana was being celebrated, Mike faced the opposite side of virality. His Instagram account, once filled with flashy posts and comments from his followers, was now a battlefield. The comments attacked him relentlessly. "You're the typical gym bully, and now everyone knows it. Is this how you treat new people? What a shame. Dwayne Johnson put you in your place, and it was beautiful." Mike tried to control the narrative, but the damage had already been done. His Instagram account, once filled with followers, became a battlefield of attacks. Finally, he decided to shut it down, but it was too late. Public perception had changed forever. Mariana arrived at the restaurant nervously. She had received Dwayne's message that morning, inviting her to dinner with him and his friend Mark. Although the idea made her anxious, something inside her told her she needed to be there. "Mariana," Dwayne exclaimed, standing up to greet her with a firm handshake. After some casual conversation, Dwayne got straight to the point. "Mariana, I want you to know something," Dwayne said, resting his forearms on the table. "It wasn't a coincidence that Mark and I wanted to meet with you. Your story has inspired us, and we believe you might be a great fit for a project we're working on." Mariana blinked in surprise. "A project?" Mark nodded. "We're launching an inclusive training program for people who don't feel welcome in conventional gyms. We want this program to have a real face, someone who has experienced fear and insecurity firsthand, but has learned to overcome it." Dwayne continued, "We've seen your growth, not just physically, but mentally. We believe you could help a lot of people who are in the same situation you once were." Mariana took a deep breath. She looked at Dwayne, then at Mark. "If I do this, I want Zoe to be involved." Dwayne raised an eyebrow. "You know how to choose your allies well, Mariana. We'll talk to her about it." Mariana felt a lump in her throat. She had never imagined that a dinner could change her life in this way. Days later, Mariana returned to Gold's gym like any other day. Although the viral video had made her a recognizable figure, she tried to stick to her routine without distractions. She approached the weight area and was about to start her warm-up. That's when she saw someone who reminded her of herself on her first day. Mariana noticed the man immediately, his hunched posture and expression of insecurity. She didn't hesitate for a second. Mariana approached him with a smile. "First time here?" The man, surprised, nodded. "Yeah, I'm not sure if this is the right place for me." Mariana looked at him with understanding. "I get it. This place is just as much yours as anyone else's. Want me to help you get started?" The days following the incident at Gold's Gym were a nightmare for Mike. Wherever he went, he felt the inquisitive stares and the whispers behind his back. He tried finding a new gym, but at each one, he encountered the same feeling of rejection, until he arrived at a small neighborhood gym that had been recommended to him. He stopped at the door, hesitating. Could this be the place where he could finally start over? The place seemed welcoming. When he stepped inside, something felt different. The air was warm, the atmosphere calm, and he was surprised to see that the people here seemed simply interested in training. That was when a familiar figure approached him, breaking the routine of the afternoon. Dwayne Johnson suddenly appeared, smiling as he saw him. Mike froze in place, surprised, unsure of how to react. Dwayne extended his hand and, with a confident smile, said, "Mike, it's been a while since I've seen you." Mike, still incredulous, shook his hand. The warmth of Dwayne was palpable. It wasn't the kind of treatment he expected after everything that had happened. "How's it going? How have you been?" Dwayne said as he guided him toward a table near the weight area. "Good, trying to get back on my feet," Mike responded, still a bit unsettled by the reception. Dwayne welcomed him with a genuine smile and led him to a nearby table. Mike, still in disbelief, sat across from him. He didn't know what to expect. "Listen, Mike, I know things haven't gone well after everything on social media, but I want you to know that it won't affect your future here." Mike nodded, still uncertain. Could he really do this? "And what can I do here?" Mike asked, feeling a bit lost. Dwayne looked at him directly, his gaze filled with confidence. "I have an idea. I need you to take care of something here. I want you to make sure that every newcomer gets the best treatment, the best possible start. The way I would have liked to have when I first started." Mike hesitated for a moment. He wasn't sure he was ready to take on a responsibility like that. Did Dwayne really believe he could do it? After everything that had happened? With a hint of discomfort, Mike looked at Dwayne. "Do you really think I'm the right person for this?" he asked, a mix of doubt and hesitation on his face. Dwayne looked at him intently, without wavering. "I know you know a lot about training. Experience has taught you what's right and what's wrong. I believe you have what it takes." Mike nodded slowly, though he still wasn't completely convinced of himself. "Thank you, really. I'll do my best." Dwayne grinned widely. "I know you will, Mike. Now let's welcome this new chapter." That night, for the first time in a long time, Mike felt like he had a purpose. The days that followed were different. Mike started arriving at the gym with a renewed attitude. Despite the voices of doubt, he focused on the challenge that Dwayne had entrusted to him. If this story moved you, subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss more inspiring content. Share this video with friends and family who need to see stories that challenge perspectives and leave an indelible mark. Explore our channel to discover stories that inspire and transform. Until the next video. One morning, while helping a newcomer get familiar with the equipment, he realized something. A more experienced man who was training nearby looked at him and gave him a nod of approval. For a moment, Mike thought that all the effort had been worth it. He was rebuilding his place in the world, not through his success or his fame, but through what he could offer to others. And maybe that was true redemption.